Hey guys, it's Kelly. Welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be showing you my recipe for my homemade meatballs, and also we're going to be making a marinara sauce with some fresh mushrooms. So I have my mushrooms there. Back there I have my cans of crushed tomatoes. I'm going to be using three of the plain crushed tomatoes and one can that has the basil in it. And then I also have onions and garlic, and that's going to be going both in the sauce and in the meatballs. And then we're just adding a few simple seasonings: salt, pepper, crushed red pepper, and olive oil. So we're going to get started on doing the sauce first. When I do any type of sauce with meatballs, I always like to chop everything up together and then I just get it separated. So that half a onion I had was pretty big, so I'm just separating it. The larger pile is going to go into the sauce. The smaller pile will go into my meat. And then I have 7 cloves of garlic here, and I'm just going to crush those as well, and then I'll separate those into 2 piles. And I'm not even going to need that other onion that's back there. So I'm just going to now get these garlic cloves crushed up, and then we'll move on to our next step. Now that everything is diced up, I have my smaller pile there that I'm setting aside for the meatballs and my larger pile for the sauce and my mushrooms. I'm just going to start opening my cans now. And I just wanted to mention I do have my oven preheated to 350. I bake my meatballs, I don't fry them. So I'm going to get these cans opened and we're going to get the sauce started and then we're going to get to work on the meatballs. So I have my heat on low to medium right now. I already had some olive oil in there, but I'm going to add a little more. I'm kind of heavy on the olive oil. I just like it that way. I'm going to start by adding my onions, and then I'm just going to add salt, pepper, and some crushed red pepper. And I do add quite a bit of crushed red pepper. If that's not your thing, just add a little bit of salt and pepper to your onions. And then we're going to add in, after we give it a little stir to get it coated with the oil, we're going to add our fresh mushrooms. And to the fresh mushrooms, I am going to add a little olive oil, salt, pepper, and a little bit more of that crushed red pepper. Then we're just going to mix that all to get it coated with the oil. And I let that go for about maybe 2 minutes, just till the mushrooms start to cook a little bit. You just kind of got to eyeball it. And then it'll be time to add your garlic. I'm using about 6 of the 8 cloves that I had. And we're just going to get that all mixed up. And we're going to let that go for probably 3 to 5 minutes. You want to start to smell that garlic. You want to see the mushrooms and onions cook down a little bit. Once you have it the way you like it, it's time to start adding the sauce. I mentioned I'm using 4 cans of sauce for this one. And I'm going to start with 1 can with the basil, and then the other 3 are just the plain crushed tomatoes. And then we're just going to stir that up, cover it. I'm keeping it on that low to medium heat, and I'm going to check it and stir it about every 15 or 20 minutes. So once that's done, it's time to get started on your meatballs. Okay, so getting started on the meatballs, I'm going to just get my meat into the bowl. I have 3/4 pound of ground pork, and I have half a pound of ground beef. I always use pork in my meatballs with the ground beef. It's just how I was taught. It's how I make them. And I always make sure that my ground pork ratio is higher than my ground beef ratio. I just think the pork just adds so much more flavor. It has more fat. So when I make a huge batch, if I'm doing a pound of ground beef, I'll be adding at least 1.25 pounds to 1.5 pounds of ground pork. But this is a smaller batch, but same thing. Then I'm just adding a little bit of salt and pepper, the onions and the garlic that we chopped up earlier. And for this batch, because it is kind of small, I'm just going to add 1 egg. For a 2 to 2.5 pound batch, I would definitely add 2 eggs. I love adding milk to my meatballs. Again, just like the pork, that's how I was taught. You always add milk to your meatball mixture. Today we were out of milk, so first time trying half and half, and you know what? It worked out. It was just fine. So I'm not going to worry about it if I'm ever out of milk again and I'm making meatballs. For the binder, I use shredded Parmesan cheese. That is 1/2 to 1/4 cup. I don't use any breadcrumbs. I just prefer to use the cheese. And honestly, I can't remember if that was 1/4 or 1/2. But at this point, I'm just going to start mixing it to see how the consistency is. And I do have some coarser shredded cheese here. I didn't end up using that. It came out to the consistency that I thought was just perfect. So here we have it. I'm going to get my pan out and we're going to get these meatballs made up and into the oven. I'm pretty sure I mentioned when I was making the sauce that I did preheat my oven to 350 for the meatballs. And here I have my cookie sheet and I have it lined with foil. And if you can see, I have it lined all the way around and a bit up the sides. The reason for that is because we're using the pork and there's gonna be a lot of pork fat on that cookie sheet, and you want that all to stay on the sheet and not drip under the foil because that's gonna be added to the sauce for extra flavor. So I showed you about how big I make my meatballs. I don't make them too small, too big. It's like about the size of the palm of my hand. And I believe this recipe with the 3/4 pound pork and the half-pound ground meat made 8 meatballs this day. So I'm just going to keep rolling these meatballs and we're going to get these into the oven. So here's my 8 meatballs. I got them pretty much the same size. I didn't, bother weighing them, measuring them out. You could always do that if you wanted to, but I got them pretty close in size. So I'm just going to put them in the 350 oven, set a timer for 30 minutes because 30 to 40 minutes should do the job. Here's my sauce after about 20-25 minutes. At this point, I did turn the heat up a little bit more, and I'm going to cover that and check that in about another 20 minutes or so. Here's how my meatballs looked after being in a 350 oven for 30 minutes. They're nice and brown on top. I didn't take the temperature on these because they're going to simmer for an hour and a half to 2 hours in that sauce. So they're going to completely cook through, even if they're a little undone in the middle right now. You can see the pork fat that this made. I was hoping for a little more. Sometimes you get a fattier pork, and to me, that is just all the flavor in the sauce. But it ended up being enough. The sauce tasted really good. So now I'm just going to get the meatballs in there and let them simmer for an hour and a half to 2 hours. Here's our sauce has been going for at least an hour now because we got it started. We made the meatballs, we cooked the meatballs, and now we're putting them in. And here's where you're scraping all that good pork fat off of the foil. I know a lot of people are probably going to say that looks really disgusting, that looks gross. Yeah, it does, but I'm telling you people, this is where the flavor's at. This is what makes it taste so good. So we have everything in there. We're just going to stir this up. I'm going to keep it on that low to medium heat covered, and it's going to go for an hour and a half, 2 hours, and I'll stir it every 15-20 minutes. So here it is all finished. I used shells for my pasta tonight. You can see all those nice mushrooms in the sauce and the meatballs. I just put some of that Parmesan cheese on top. This was so good. It was even better a couple days later, just like all sauces or chilies that you make. And it's just a great recipe. I hope you guys give it a try. If you're new here and you haven't subscribed yet, please do. I'd love to have you around. Thanks so much for watching, you guys. I'll see you on the next one. Bye.